Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. You know what's crazy about leftist thinking? They're so committed to big government, they're so committed to a big bloated state and central planning that it completely blinds them. You know, any rational person, especially in your real life, if you're doing something, and especially if you're spending a whole lot of money on something, and it's not delivering, you know, at one point, you gotta face reality. What we're doing isn't working, it's time to rethink, it's time to pivot. Seems like the basic reaction, right? But when it comes to leftoids in the government, no matter how big the failure, it's never really a true failure. No matter how bad the results, they can never admit that the program or the department that they created isn't working. No, it's always, we need more money, or we need to do more, we need a new program, another one. They just don't have the ability to ever scale back, to ever go backwards, and that's really the problem with big state leftism. It's kind of like a virus. It just keeps multiplying and multiplying. That's essentially its whole purpose, and that's how it works. But it's time to have the conversation that the left is so desperately trying to avoid and is so offended by. It's time to face the brutal truth that the Department of Education has been a monumental failure, that the American education system as a whole is failing at historic levels, and it's probably time to do exactly what Donald Trump is doing. Start off from scratch, scale back, because doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results is the definition of insanity. Okay, so first off, I want to put things into clear perspective, because we got all these Democrats pushing the same outrage, blow up, meltdown nonsense, of course in defense of the Department of Education, but I want you to understand that this is what they're defending. What you're seeing on screen here is a shocking new report that shows that in 30 different public schools in Illinois, not a single student is reading at grade level. These are 30 different schools that are all relatively well-funded to varying different degrees. And then in the final column here, it says number of students who are reading at a proficient level. 0 across the board from top to bottom. Some of these schools have 500 students, and none of them are reading at a basic grade level. This isn't a story of one struggling school in a rough neighborhood. This is systemic failure at epic proportions. These schools aren't just underperforming, they are actively failing the students that are trapped in them. And most importantly, the argument that I was trying to build here, this is what Democrats are defending. These kids are being set up for a lifetime of failure, unable to read. What this really is educational malpractice at its absolute worst. And who do you think is in charge of these schools? Democrats, and of course the left-wing big government institution that is the Department of Education. And keep in mind, this isn't just happening in Illinois, it's happening across the country. Massive failure, declining literacy rates, plummeting test scores. The federal government is allocating more and more money to the Department of Education, constant increase in funding, and clearly it's being wasted on a broken system. And yet what do the Democrats say? Oh, well, we need more funding.
I want to ask you about the Department of Education. States, as everyone I think knows, provide the majority of the funding and oversight for your local schools. But Kentucky, when we looked at the numbers, gets the 4th most federal education funding per student of any state in this country. How are schools going to get that money if the president closes the education department?
I think the bigger question, if we're sending all this money to Kentucky and all the other states, why are our scores abysmal? Why do 2/3 of the kids not read at proficiency? Why do 2/3 of the kids or more not have math proficiency? So
Isn't that up to the state?
Failure. What I'd like to let me finish. I'd leave it back to the states. It has always been a position, a very mainstream Republican position, to have control of the schools by the states, send the money back to the states, or better yet, never take it from the states.
Yep.
About half of our budget in Kentucky goes to education, and that's the same in a lot of states.
But when we looked at the budget in Kentucky, the state receives $2 billion in federal education funding. Do you have a guarantee that the federal government, federal taxpayers will still provide $2 billion in education funding? That seems important to your state.
I'd rather, well, no, what I'd rather is a guarantee that my kids can read and write and do math. The amount of dollars, look, the number of dollars has gone up exponentially and our scores have gone the other way. So dollars are not proportional to educational success. What I want is success.
It's always the same garbage talking point. But let's be absolutely real here. Funding obviously isn't the issue. For decades, the Department of Education's budget has ballooned. It's reached hundreds of billions of dollars, and yet test scores are down. Proficiency levels are lower than ever. Other countries with much smaller economies and fewer resources are outpacing America. So clearly it's not about the funding, no, it's about the system itself, it's about the department. The United States spends more per student than almost every other developed nation, yet American students rank embarrassingly low in math, in sciences, and in reading. The Department of Education isn't working. And actually, funnily enough, even CNN's Dana Bash accidentally admitted that when she was trying to make the opposite argument.
There's lots of data that shows that, I think, to put it mildly, education could be better in America.
Absolutely.
But you also just admitted, and it's just fact, that most of the funding, most of all of the curriculum, and everything that goes into educating our students happens on a local level. So I'm not quite sure how eliminating the Department of Education is going to make those test scores go up.
She claims that most of the funding, all of the curriculum, and everything that goes into educating students happens at a local level. And she makes the point, so I'm not quite sure how eliminating the Department of Education is going to make those test scores go up. Exactly, Dana. If education is mostly local, then why do federal bureaucrats in Washington need to be siphoning money from the states? The simple fact is the Department of Education is not needed. They're just in the way. As Linda McMahon pointed out,
what we saw with our scores recently with the NAEP, which is our country's report card, it's unacceptable where education is in our country today. And so the Department of Education does not educate one child. It does not establish any curriculum in any states. It doesn't hire teachers. It doesn't establish programs. What it is more of a pass-through of funding, which is appropriated by Congress, by the way. And so we want to make sure that that funding continues in the departments where it needs to be, but at the same time, give states the opportunities to be innovative and creative with their teaching.
She says the Department of Education doesn't educate one child. It's more of a pass-through for funding. In other words, it's another bloated bureaucracy that exists just to justify its own existence. But if you listen to Democrats, of course, like every other federal bloated institution that they defend, the country simply cannot survive without this department. I'm seeing all kinds of people, all kinds of leftoids all over social media making all these claims that all kinds of important disability programs and student aid programs will disappear, that these evil Republicans are trying to get rid of important services that students depend on, the most vulnerable students in need. But just as Linda McMahon said, that's not the plan.
The outward-facing programs that are going to be affecting students there's not going to be any defunding for those programs. When he talked about student loans, that would be going to the Small Business Administration. And also then the programs for students with disabilities will more than likely rest in HHS, which, by the way, is where they began. I think we're looking at putting things in different departments where they can operate very efficiently as we look at how we can shut down the Department of Education.
Do they not operate efficiently now?
Not as well as they should be.
Just as she explains, student loans will be managed by another department. Disability programs will return to where they originally began. Nothing is being cut, it's simply being moved to appropriate places. You know, in my view, it's pretty obvious what's happening. The leftist mind is in complete delusion and denial. Their solution to everything is more government, more spending, more bureaucrats, more bureaucracy. And then the other side is looking at the actual results, looking at the actual performance, and is willing to point the finger and say, hey, this is not working. We need to change. We need to rethink the entire system. When you have 30 schools in a single state producing the abysmal results that they are, 0 kids able to read at grade level, well, that ought to be a wake-up call. One group is waking up, the other one is still living in absolute denial and puts their ideology above the kids and the future of the nation. Anyways, that's pretty much what I got for you guys on this one. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to leave a like and possibly subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.